Ever since the late 1800s, people have debated the meaning and purpose of cave art. And today we're counting down our picks for the top 20 greatest archaeological discoveries ever. To the public, she was simply Lucy, and scientists tried to piece together a picture of her life. For this list, we're looking at the most amazing and important archaeological discoveries throughout human history. Have you visited any of these locations? Let us know in the comments. Number 20, Göbekli Tepe. While this site was first noted in 1963, its importance wasn't recognized until decades later. In the mid-90s, German archaeologist Klaus Schmidt realized that the stone slabs in the area were the tops of prehistoric megaliths and began excavating. During the intensive dig, Schmidt and his team began to unearth dozens of additional giant stone monoliths covered in intricate carvings, some weighing as much as 20 tons. What he unearthed was a site of massive circular structures on stone pillars dating all the way back to the Neolithic period. The megaliths at Göbekli Tepe are the world's oldest, erected as early as 9500 BCE. No one really knows what the site was used for, but the carved reliefs provide glimpses into prehistoric religious practices. Göbekli is a beautiful story. It was the first temple in the world, the birthplace of religion. It carries with it a certain mysticism that sparks the question, why? What we do know is that Göbekli Tepe is one of the world's oldest human settlements, marking the transition from nomadic lifestyles to permanent habitation. Number 19, the oldest footprints in North America. In 2018, human footprints were found in British Columbia, Canada, that dated back about 13,000 years. At the time, these were the oldest footprints discovered in North America, but just a few years later, in 2021, that record was shattered. The footprints show how humans coexisted with large wild animals, and many are of children, revealing a story about everyday life and play. Archaeologists working in New Mexico's White Sands National Park unearthed tracks that are between 21,000 and 23,000 years old. Not only does this almost double the record for the oldest footprint in North America, but it also completely restructures our understanding of early North American settlement. The new footprints suggest humans arrived before the ice-blocked migration and came to the southwestern U.S. up to 23,000 years ago. Prior to this game-changing discovery, most experts dated the continent's earliest habitation to between 11,000 and 13,000 years ago. Number 18, Richard III's grave. This controversial figure ruled as King of England and Lord of Ireland until 1485, when he died in the Battle of Bosworth Field. With his death, the Wars of the Roses came to an end, and with it, the Middle Ages in England. His reign was later immortalized in Shakespeare's eponymous play. As Shakespeare put it, "My kingdom for a horse." But Richard had lost his steed in battle and fell dead on the ground, the last British king to die on the field of battle. Following Richard III's death, his corpse was quickly buried and lost to time until 2012. That year, researchers discovered the foundations of a medieval church underneath a modern parking lot, and it was there that they found the skeleton of Richard III. His well-preserved skeleton was buried without a coffin or a shroud. A combination of markings on the bones and genetic analysis proved what the experts had hoped for. After more than 5 centuries, we had finally found one of England's most notorious rulers. Number 17, Madaba Map. In the late 19th century, construction began on a new Greek Orthodox church in Jordan's capital city of Madaba. While building the new structure, workers unearthed an ancient mosaic on the floor of the existing church. Right at the center of it is a piece showing Jerusalem. When we look at Jerusalem, you can see the walls going around. This mosaic is now known as the Madaba Map, and it shows parts of the Middle East dating to the 6th century. The map contains the oldest known depiction of both Jerusalem and the Holy Land. Not only that, but it was used extensively to locate sites mentioned in the Bible, and it is currently the oldest geographic floor mosaic in the world. But also, if you look, you'll see other cities. We have Jericho here, we have Ascalon and Gaza represented here as well. Right at the top, you'll see the Dead Sea. Number 16, the Serapeum of Alexandria. Serving as the greatest library of its age, the Library of Alexandria attracted scholars to Egypt and served as the ancient world's symbol of knowledge. In its prime, the Library of Alexandria housed an unprecedented number of scrolls and attracted some of the Greek world's greatest minds. It proved so popular that a so-called daughter library was later created, called the Serapeum of Alexandria. The Serapeum lasted a bit longer than its famous father, and it was finally destroyed in the year 391. The site later became a Muslim cemetery, and in the mid-1940s, the foundations of the Serapeum were discovered. With it, one of the greatest centers of learning in human history was unearthed. Number 15, Knossos. Found on the Greek island of Crete, Knossos is often regarded as the oldest city in Europe, and that's saying something. Featuring a massive and world-renowned palace complex, Knossos was the primary capital of the ancient Minoan civilization, which inhabited both Crete and other Aegean islands. However, very few know that around the palace, there was a very extensive settlement, the largest urban center in Crete and mainland Greece. The civilization prospered from about 3500 BCE to 1100 BCE, but it's believed that Knossos had been inhabited since the Neolithic period. An amateur archaeologist named Minos Kalokerinos discovered the location of Knossos in 1878, and the ancient site was unearthed by Sir Arthur Evans throughout much of the early 1900s. Sir Arthur Evans began the first systematic investigation of the archaeological site and brought to light the so-called Palace of King Minos, the center of a hitherto unknown civilization. Number 14, Ötzi. Just imagine mountaineering through the Alps when you stumble across an ancient human corpse embedded in a glacier. This is exactly what happened to German tourists Helmut and Erika Simon in September of 1991. As they passed a rocky gully, they made a grisly discovery. They found what is now known as Ötzi the Iceman, a natural mummy dating to about 3230 BCE. Ötzi is the oldest natural mummy in European history, having died about 5,000 years before he was found, preserved in ice. Regardless, the body is in remarkable condition considering its age, and it's provided researchers an incredible glimpse into Copper Age Europeans and their lifestyles. For sure, we want to know about how he died and why he died. This mummy, such an old mummy, is the only one we have here in this region. Number 13, Mohenjo-Daro. A large human settlement dating to 2500 BCE, Mohenjo-Daro is one of the oldest cities in the world. Located in modern-day Pakistan, Mohenjo-Daro was one of the most ambitious cities of its day, complete with street grids, a sewage system, and many other ingenious feats of engineering. The city of Mohenjo-Daro rivaled the ancient civilizations in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Archaeologists believe that over 35,000 people once occupied the city. It was a remarkable settlement that showcased the creativity and boundless imagination of humanity. Unfortunately, Mohenjo-Daro was completely abandoned around 1900 BCE as the local Indus civilization went into a decline. It remained lost to time until the 1920s when an officer of the Archeological Survey of India located the ancient city. 60 years after its discovery, Mohenjo-Daro was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. So far, only 10% of the city has been unearthed. The authorities have stopped digging because they don't have the resources to preserve what has so far been discovered. If it hadn't been discovered when it was in 1901, no one would possibly believe that it could exist because it's so sophisticated. This mysterious object was found submerged in Grecian waters at the turn of the 20th century. Located inside an ancient shipwreck, the strange device was already 2,000 years old when it was found, and despite being eroded by the sea for all that time, it was still eventually identified as the world's oldest computer. Finally, another century after its discovery, we now know definitively what it did. It was a device used to chart the positions of celestial bodies so that the ancient Greeks knew when eclipses would happen. Some have argued that it's so complex the Greeks couldn't have made it at all. There are even some who say it must have been created by aliens. It took a 3D reconstruction of the entire device in 2021 to get a better understanding of how it worked, though its purpose was suspected for decades. For centuries, historians debated not only whether the Trojan War actually happened but also whether the lost city of Troy ever existed at all. It's a story that's been told and retold by poets and actors for thousands of years. But is it real? Did the city of Troy actually exist? The Trojan War is the focus of one of ancient Greece's most famous epic poems, Homer's Iliad, and legendary Greek heroes like Achilles and Odysseus fought in it. But Troy's location became lost knowledge. Throughout the 1800s, many researchers argued that Hisarlik, a site in western Turkey, was probably the elusive city. Throughout the 20th century, scholars became aware that we can't even be sure that Troy is indeed the Troy. Finally, after decades of debate, experts came to a consensus that, yes, Hizarlik is, in all likelihood, Troy. Unfortunately, we've yet to find conclusive evidence that the Trojan horse existed, but Troy's identification was hugely important for historians. The idea that the Greeks would have, in fact, built a large wooden horse, hidden inside it, and had it dragged inside of Troy is certainly possible, but it kind of strains your credulity a little bit that someone really could have pulled that off. Tutankhamun's burial chamber is filled with magical decoration, but beside it, the rest of the tomb is left bare. This simple tomb is unlike any other royal tomb in the valley. The Valley of the Kings is the final resting place of many ancient Egyptian pharaohs, but throughout its history, a number of tombs have fallen victim to grave robbers. This is the Egyptian Red List of the missing species. We are already missing from the museums and the sites and everywhere in Egypt, and we give it to Interpol to stop any piece of them if they're moving from a country to a country. Tutankhamun's tomb was different. Remarkably, though grave robbers did break in shortly after it was initially sealed up, most of its contents were intact when archaeologists found it in 1922. Over 5,000 priceless artifacts, including golden statues, were discovered. In the burial chamber, the pharaoh's mummy, wearing a golden death mask, was placed inside a coffin made of more than 200 pounds of solid gold. Today, Tutankhamun's gilded mask makes him arguably the most famous and recognizable pharaoh in history. Considering Tutankhamun only reigned for about 10 years and died between the young ages of 18 and 19, that is quite the legacy. This modest tomb was jammed full of all the royal possessions that were usually buried with a king. It can't have been meant to be all jumbled up like that. People were just trying to cram as much stuff as possible. Along with the mask, the tomb also contained a statue of Anubis, the god of the dead, and a dagger made from a fallen meteor. One of the most remarkable medieval graves anywhere in Europe was excavated in England in 1939. Well, I'd say it's the biggest archaeological discovery ever made in this country, so it is an immense responsibility to look after the site. But also, really, what we're trying to do at Sutton Hoo is tell more people about it. The owner of an estate in Suffolk, Edith Pretty, enlisted some archaeologists to find out what was underneath the burial mounds on her property. What they uncovered was astounding, so much so that the story inspired a 2021 film, The Dig. That's a ship. How do you mean a ship? That's the ship that's been buried in the mound. Why would anyone want to bury a ship? Well, I expect because that's a grave. The most promising mound contained an entire long ship and innumerable artifacts, including pieces of armor made of gold and other Anglo-Saxon relics. Though it's one of the UK's most impressive archaeological discoveries, it's still not entirely clear whose grave it actually is. Shortly after the inquest, which ruled that all the items found in the Sutton Hoo burial mound lawfully belonged to Edith Pretty, Pretty donated the entire collection to the British Museum. It's among the most valuable donations of its kind, and the collection itself remains at the heart of the museum. Most evidence suggests it was the final resting place of a famous East Anglian king, Redwald, who ruled the region around 1,400 years ago. This isn't one specific archaeological location but an entire locality housing some of the most important works relating to paleoanthropology, or the study of early humans. Found in the northeast corner of Tanzania, Olduvai Gorge has been invaluable in our understanding of early human culture and evolution. What it's telling us is that there's a lot out there to be found, that we actually don't have the whole story of human evolution. Researchers have unearthed ancient stone tools and hominid fossils. Occupation of the site is believed to stretch back nearly 2 million years when it was inhabited by an archaic human species called Homo habilis. And then these other things, which are generally termed Homo habilis after the species that Louis Leakey named at Olduvai Gorge in 1960. Without Olduvai Gorge and its riches of archaeological material, our understanding of archaic humans would be much more limited. If you're interested in early humanity, then you cannot go wrong with the Cave of Altamira. This is the Museum of Altamira, built right next to the cave where the original cave paintings, dating back to the Paleolithic era, were discovered. The original cave has been closed to preserve its archaeologically important remains. Archaeology has uncovered many notable caves relating to ancient humanity, including Lascaux and another in the small Spanish town of Ardales, but nothing beats Altamira. Also located in Spain, this cave houses numerous prehistoric drawings and paintings, most of which depict local animals. After the site was discovered in 1868, the suggestion that the paintings were prehistoric was met with some skepticism, not only owing to the nature of the drawings but also because no other prehistoric cave art was known to exist in Europe. We're also interested in whether or not human symbolic behavior coincides, for example, with language, or whether human symbolic behavior, in fact, dates right back to the point at which we start looking like humans. But the research eventually prevailed, and it's now believed that the paintings are around 36,000 years old. One of the most significant archaeological finds of all time, the terracotta army, was discovered completely by accident. They found some pieces of pottery. They also found the head of the terracotta warriors, and then the archaeological team came to this area and started to dig. The terracotta army was first uncovered in the Shaanxi province of western China by a group of farmers in the 1970s. The army resides within a tomb constructed over 2,200 years ago as the resting place of Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, which is why it's so elaborate. He was its first emperor, and his empire became his fortress, protected by a great wall. The legend says he was a tyrant driven mad by power. In the parts we've been able to excavate, there are over 8,000 soldiers made out of clay, standing row upon row, there to guard Emperor Qin in the afterlife. Hundreds of secret subterranean soldiers, all life-sized and built to be immortal. But even more astonishing is the fact that the entire necropolis is believed to be almost 40 square miles in size, with most of the site hidden in vaults that aren't yet accessible.